mentioned at the top, a source familiar with the matter tells CNN the National Archives has asked the Justice Department to investigate his handling of White House records. The former president, as you know, habitually tore up official documents after reading them. According to the Washington Post, archive officials suspected he might have broken laws on handling government documents, including potentially classified material, and reached out to DOJ. Joining us now, CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel, CNN political analyst and New York Times Washington correspondent Maggie Haberman, and CNN chief legal analyst Jeffrey Tuba. Jeff, I want to start with you on the purely legal matter here. The Post says that Donald Trump was warned about tearing up documents by two chiefs of staff and maybe also the White House counsel. So could he be in legal jeopardy here?
Well, I think the only way he could be in legal jeopardy is if someone could prove, if the Justice Department can prove, he was tearing up documents in order to avoid disclosure to a specific investigation. If he just did this as a matter of course, or if he did it just in violation of the Presidential Records Act, that is not a criminal violation. In order to be a criminal violation, you have to look at his intent. And only if his intent was to make sure those documents didn't get into the hands of investigators, whether it was Robert Mueller earlier or the congressional investigators later, that's the only way this could be a criminal problem.
Even if he was warned specifically by chiefs of staff and White House counsel?
Yes, I don't think there is any way that could be seen as a criminal matter unless he was specifically trying to avoid or interfere with or frustrate an actual investigation.
All right, Maggie, I am just seeing that the New York Times has some new reporting on the documents found at Mar-a-Lago. What can you tell us?
So, John, my colleagues Mike Schmidt and Reed Epstein are reporting tonight that there's possible classified material that archivists found when they got these, mini boxes back from Mar-a-Lago. They have yet to figure out exactly what it is, but, this would obviously raise significantly the questions about the material that Trump took, what the purpose of taking it was, what other possible classified material, if any, there might be. Again, we don't know specifically what they think might be classified, but it does, heighten the questions around it. That's very different than simply, the original copy of a letter from Kim Jong-un or the copy of the original of a letter from former President Obama. This would be something very different.
Okay, Jeffrey Tuba, does that raise the legal stakes here?
I don't really think it does because, presidents have the power to declassify anything they want at any time. I mean, again, this is really bad procedure. It's not the way the government is supposed to work. And by the way, Hillary Clinton may have lost the 2016 election because Donald Trump criticized the way she handled classified material on her emails. But as a criminal matter, I find it very hard to believe this is something the Justice Department would prosecute.
Irony, not always against the law, I suppose you could say. Jamie Gangel, in terms of the January 6th committee, how much does the destruction of these documents or the tearing up and retaping of them, how much is it getting in the way of their investigation or factoring into what's going on there?
So, to Jeffrey's point, look, this is not a surprise to the January 6th committee because, after all, as Maggie has been reporting since day one, he's been ripping up papers and did it for 4 years. So the committee has known this was going to be a stumbling block. I think that's the reason it's so important that they have all of these interviews with witnesses, with people who worked at the White House firsthand. Some of those people are handing over documents, texts, phone logs. But I think, just to go back to Jeffrey's point for a moment, I spoke to someone last night about exactly this issue, and the question this person said, this was a source with knowledge of the investigation, was he trying to circumvent something when it comes to January 6th? And I think that's a very specific question we should look at. I also think the National Archives are really angry that he just did this over and over again.
Maggie, I want to turn to the January 6th committee and the subpoena for former President Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, who also personally, he documented his efforts to overturn the 2020 election in his book. Place Peter Navarro in the Trump orbit. How important was he?
Sure. Let me just really quickly say I appreciate, Jamie, the credit on the paper ripping story, but that was my colleague Annie Carney, and it was one of the best stories of the presidency, and I was very jealous of it when she was a competitor and broke it. Peter Navarro was sort of a jack of all trades around the former president, John. You know, he was somebody who, yes, he was the trade advisor, but he clearly liked running all kinds of other errands for Trump. He inserted himself in trying to figure out who the author Anonymous was and devoted an enormous amount of energy to it. He would weigh in on all kinds of other issues. He viewed himself and portrayed himself as one of the defenders of the president's political movement, and so he was somebody who went out. It's not clear to me whether Trump actually asked him to do this or whether he volunteered to do it, but he went out and he did all kinds of quote unquote work around the election after November 3rd and before January 6th, and he issued this report, and I think he held a press conference where he talked about its findings, and now he talked about this all in a book. It's not surprising to me that he is not cooperating with the January 6th committee. The former president has drawn a pretty clear line that he doesn't want people doing it, but Navarro is one of Trump's favorites.
Jamie, Peter Navarro out and out says that he wanted Congress to stop the certification process on January 6th. He writes it, he says it in interviews whenever he can. What does the committee want to get from him?
I don't think they expect they're going to get anything from him. To Maggie's point, I mean, what he told CNN was the committee must negotiate his potential appearance. That is not exactly, guys, what day, what time do you want me to show up? But in talking to the committee about people like Peter Navarro, Steve Bannon, Rudy Giuliani, Dan Scavino, they don't expect them to come, but for the record, they're putting out there that they should come.
And Jeffrey, go ahead.
If I can just make a point about this, I mean, the idea that Peter Navarro and Mark Meadows can write books about their interactions with Donald Trump, which they disclose freely and for profit, and then say, oh, by the way, in response to a subpoena, I'm not going to answer those questions. I mean, it is just outrageous, but it is also a matter of the clock ticking. I mean, there is just not time to have a legal fight with these people. Steve Bannon, remember, he is actually under indictment, but that case is on a slow boat to nowhere. The committee just doesn't have the time or the resources to force recalcitrant witnesses to testify at this point.
Jeffrey Tubman, Maggie Haberman, Jamie Gangel, thank